Hey guys, welcome back to Edenic Roundtable, the virtual sessions. I'm Wayne Willis, as always, joined by Rob Lewis and Jamie Del Grosso from Edenic Group. Hi, boys.
Hi.
Hi, Wayne.
And hello there. And again, we have another guest on the show, which we're delighted to have, Lindsey Newman-Wood, who is a sprint master at Mustard Design Sprints and also a marketing consultant at Passion Marketing Solutions. Hi, Lindsey.
Hi, guys.
How are you doing? You keeping well?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, good. Thanks for being on the show today. Really, the topic that I kind of wanted to touch upon today really was around, since you are a sprint master, and we'll talk about that as we go down, and sprints is certainly something Edenic uses quite a lot as well with our clients. So I just wanted to talk around that topic about what sprints are, how they work, what it really means. It sounds like a nice fancy tech word from Google, doesn't it? And it sounds like a cool way to say do things fast. But I think it's really interesting because this process of sprinting through ideation and ideas and trying to come up with new solutions, it really is an effective way to come up with new ideas.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, it was designed by Google some, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. And the main objective really when they designed them was that they were Google Ventures were having all these sort of tech startup businesses in Silicon Valley. And they were getting a bit cheesed off that actually was just taking far too long to launch anything. So they had some great technology, got all these techie guys in their little sort of offices and their workshops working on some fantastic ideas, but they just were never getting to launch. So Google Ventures created this process where within originally 5 days, and now it's been developed to do 4 days, but in a very short amount of time, working with the team, working with the users, you get to launch the products much faster. But on the flip side of that as well is that you get to test if those ideas actually have legs, so to speak. So you get to fail fast. So, there are times where I work with companies where they've spent 18 months and hundreds of thousands of pounds developing ideas that actually should never go to launch, but they feel this investment that they really need to carry on with it because actually the MD came up with the idea and a team of people sat around a table all went with it. And actually the sprint helps you to kind of test that really and do it quickly. So you're not having to invest months and months of time. You're not having to spend lots and lots of money on something that actually, has it got legs? And if it hasn't, let's ditch it. Or is it something that actually just needs reiterating, changing, tweaking? It might be that the users, when you go to actually test it with them, go, why are you launching this? This is just a bad idea, or something already exists like this and I get it for free. Why am I going to pay you to do it? So it's a great way of testing ideas and also tackling big challenges as well. So when people feel a bit stuck, we often use the sprint methodology to kind of help people get the team together, working on ideas and actually taking it through a process. So it's not just a traditional brainstorming session where, people just throw ideas in. It's more structured and it gets the team on board and gets them to go through a structure and a process, really.
Yeah, Lindsey, you said something there that really chimed with me. I just remembered actually that I know, like in my corporate experience, there were lots of famous projects that you would work on in a company where everybody on the project team thought it was a bad idea, but fundamentally they're all getting paid to be there and progress the projects, and nobody ever said anything. And I just found it really, really weird. It was like that whole Emperor's New Clothes thing. The people were like working on these projects for years sometimes, and they're just saying, "Well, this is never going to work." Yeah. But what you said is like get to that point really, really quickly and find out that right at the start, and then don't waste your time, which is a pretty good mindset, I think.
Definitely. And what I love about the sprint stuff as well is if you get the team together, sometimes the quietest person on the team still get to have a voice. So the process gets people to work individually and together. So they work on ideas and they form solutions without having to think, oh, well, Dave's got, a really great idea and he's sold it into the team, so I won't say anything. It's more about, well, everybody comes up with their ideas and we do a lot of note and voting. So lots of Post-it notes, lots of sketching, lots of getting people to really think about ideas that they can use. And then people vote on the best ideas. And there's always a decider in the room as well. So it stops the kind of, sometimes in brainstorming sessions, they can just kind of go off on tangents. Whereas this is very much, right, you've got 15 minutes to do this particular task, and then they vote on it as well. So the decider in the room can say, okay, I can see those were the most popular, but this is the one we're going to go with, and this is the one we're going to take to the next stage. So you got all those people in the room. You haven't got this kind of drawn out process where we go, well, okay, we had this meeting. Yeah, we'll go off and do a few emails, and then we'll come back again next week. You've just got everybody working quite intensely, but also quite creatively as well.
Yeah, I mean this should be music, shouldn't it? So if you're on a leadership team for like a major FMCG or a pharma company or some other organization or whatever, I mean, like the whole concept. I mean, you've explained that quite eloquently and quite clearly as to what the benefit of a sprint. It should just be music to the ears, shouldn't it? Like you're absolutely right. There's so many, definitely with the corporates that we've worked with. There's so much money and time and procrastination and whatever spent trying to get through this whole process to get to this new thing that comes at the end of it. And then it turns out, as you say, this new thing either doesn't work, it doesn't sell, people don't like it, whatever the case might be. But they've invested so much into it that it's like, God, we've got to push it through, no matter what.
You think,
no, I'll just say, well, no, you just think this would just be like, music to anybody's ears, right?
You would, but in reality, it's usually those leaders are asking for the 17th PowerPoint slide deck to take them to the next stage, and they can't meet them for 6 weeks, and and then when you get there, they're in a bad mood. So it's absolutely about leadership and culture and getting the best out.
Yeah.
And another thing you touched upon there, Lindsay, which I completely agree with, is running ideation through this kind of sprint methodology. It's a really great opportunity to bring in people that usually wouldn't have a voice in that, and just throw their ideas into the pot, so to speak. Because at the start, and we'll go through kind of the process shortly, but because at the start, really, you're entering it without essentially any barriers, and it's kind of quote unquote blue sky thinking, and okay, well, let's just throw everything in the hat. But then afterwards, you get to you're going through the process, and you're going through this selection process to kind of narrow down those into more credible solutions to start prototyping or testing or whatever it might be. But it just means that somebody who doesn't usually have an input on kind of what a product development might be or something like that can just come in and just say, well, listen, why don't we try this? What do we think about this? And at least the idea can then be considered in a quick, rapid fire part of the process, rather than it immediately dismissed because all the barriers in front of that prevent that from happening, which I think is perfectly right for innovation culture.
Because sometimes as well, the person that it could be Susan that answers a lot of customer queries on the telephone. If she's in the mix, to be able to say, well, have you thought about this? Because I'm speaking to customers daily who are saying they've got this problem, and somebody that's perhaps on the senior team is not at the coalface enough to kind of know that some of those issues exist even. So it's good. The sprints I enjoy most, where you've got a really great mix and you see that team coming together, where it's usually just maybe the product development team or the innovation team or the marketing team that are working on this completely separate. And, it just surprised me sometimes how departments just don't even talk to each other, and suddenly have this new respect that, oh yeah, okay, yes, maybe I do need to start talking to you a bit more regularly because you've got some good ideas and you're bringing something to the table.
Yeah, it's almost like a way to network, isn't it? It's surprisingly within one organization how many people actually don't interact with each other, and I think the other point to make as well is that naturally we're leaning towards kind of global conglomerate big organizations, but this is completely relevant to a small team that's got a little business in a city center or whatever it might be. The concept is the same. It's just how many people you're involved in it, essentially. So my next point on the list really is we should talk about what this is. So what is a sprint? So for people that are first hearing this, what is the process for running a sprint?
Well, it's mainly across 4 days. So there is some prep done beforehand just to kind of investigate what the challenge or the idea is and sort of talking to the teams. But primarily the main work is done across four days. And it's kind of a workshop style, but very sort of very closely managed and facilitated by me. So everything is timed. So they even have a sort of a visual old-fashioned timer in the room. Sometimes that scares people to death to start with, but they surprise themselves because actually some of the best ideas are done under pressure, where you've got 5 minutes to work on this. So on day one, we sort of we really look at what the idea or the challenge is, and we really sort of go quite deep into what that really looks like, and kind of frame that really on the first day with the team. And then on the second day, we look at solutions. So it's lots of sketching, lots of ideas generated, and we keep finely tuning that to the stage where we're coming up with one main solution. And then we sort of decide on what that is going to be, and then we take it to prototype. So the ones that can be done the fastest are usually digital products. So if the solution is an app or a website or something like that, we can prototype that usually within 1 day, but in a very lo-fi way. So there's not usually lots of bells and whistles, but it's enough to take to the users on the final day to do some user testing and get their feedback on it, really.
Yeah. And I suppose this can be adapted to some extent, can't it? How the sprint process works as well. I mean, I can say I know from Edenic's point of view that there's a similar kind of process going through those stages, which is kind of looking at the stimulus around and a download, as we call it, of what the problem is, and all the resources and information around that can kind of stimulate that thinking. Then you've kind of got that ideation stage where you're coming up with ideas and just throwing stuff at the wall without any restrictions.
Yeah.
Then you're kind of getting into a selection stage where you start to whittling those down, and you can use different formats for like selecting and how you might do that. Then you get into like a prototyping stage, as you've touched upon there, which, you can do this in such really creative ways. I mean, you don't need a room full of coders or whatever. For example, if it's a digital product, you need a piece of paper and a biro, to some extent. I mean, you can draw it out or wireframe it or just do some sketches or, place Post-its in a circle, whatever it is. I mean, there's lots of ways you can do it, And then essentially to the final part is you've got the test stage, which is, again, could be quite basic. It could be essentially running that past the stakeholders that would be involved in that company, to see if it aligns with kind of what they're doing. It might be having a chat with a few consumers. It might be speaking to some experts of the industry or whatever, and just getting a feel for it. And you can do that all within, I mean, really, as you say, 4 days or 5 days. I mean, that the first 3 of those probably could be done in an afternoon if you wanted to do a really quick fire sprint with your team and spend an hour coming up with the problem. I mean, that's fair to say, isn't it, boys? You could, within sort of an hour, really, you could really start this process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've done this process over a short period of time, over a long period of time. I think the beauty of the sprint process is that it's very flexible, and you can kind of change it to the needs that you want. Obviously, outside of this, I do a lot of creative consultation. I use a slightly different sprint process, but essentially it's all based on the exact same methodology. And really, the way that I've always seen sprints is it's kind of like a safety net. So especially when it comes to anything creative or innovation based, asking people to think creatively if they've never done it before is terrifying for a lot of people because it's completely open ended. It's sort of say, just think of something good, which is, is a scary concept for a lot of people. Well, I think with the sprint, it kind of gives them a couple of parameters to work within, so that they feel a little bit more comfortable. And, some people need that kind of guidance and that, that hand holding through the process. And I think that's where this comes in. So whether that hand holding needs to be a very long drawn out thing where you really take them through each step, or maybe it's a team that's a little bit more adapt at what they're doing and you can literally just throw them straight in and run it every day. I don't think there's kind of a specific time limit on it. It depends on the team you're working with. And you just kind of adjust the sprints to that team.
Definitely. Yeah. We used the sprint process recently as well to help an agency completely rebrand. And we just used the process and the methodology, but we applied it to what they needed. And it was amazing the results we got working with the team to completely rename them and rebrand them. And when we left after sort of day 5, they were like, we've achieved more in 5 days than we have on our own for the last 2 years, and it was the same people, same team, just getting them in a room and actually working with them in that sort of environment and giving them, as you say, Jamie, those parameters and saying, here's a way of doing it. Here's a way of, for you, here's some an infrastructure, a bit of a framework to work within. People feel safer because just giving them a blank piece of paper and a couple of post-it notes and a few pens, they just think, I don't know where to start. Not everyone's used to working like that. So it really helps.
Yeah, the facility. Sorry, Jeremy, go on.
I think branding is actually a fantastic example of where sprints really work well. Because with something like that, every time I've ever spoke to someone about branding, they've got so many preconceptions of what their brand is or what it should be already. And to get them to think differently, to brand yourself is probably the hardest thing to do. So using that sprint process, people start to think differently. And then by the end of it, you see people going, well, I would not have thought of that, if I did it, the way I would have usually approached it. So I think that's a really good example of how sprints can be used to really just, open people's minds up a little bit and get them to think slightly differently about what they're doing.
Definitely.
Yeah, Lindsay, what I really like about your process is if you're doing it over 4 or 5 days, it's really good because it gives a longevity to sort of really get your head around this process and really get immersed in it over that period of time, which means then after then, that same group or that same company might take that same process but do it in a shorter period of time once they've kind of got the head around the parameters of how it works and the restrictions that might have been in place or whatever, understanding all of that stuff, which, you can really do in an immersive week. You can really get a feel for it. And then when you see some results come out of that, like you say, with that branding job, at the side of that, they're saying, wow, I just can't believe this has come out of 5 days. We've been looking at this for whatever, but then that it kind of spurs them on, because then they go, well, okay, so what else are we looking at? Well, let's try that again, but let's see if we can do it in a shorter time or whatever, So I think that the fact that the whole thing is completely scalable in terms of what you're trying to address, and you could be doing that with 200 people or you could be doing that with 5 people, as long as you're following the process, then it's completely effective across the board, really, isn't it?
Definitely.
The other interesting thing for me is just like we're having this video call now, is the idea of being able to do these remotely. So this is the perfect time. Everyone's remote. And we've touched upon this very briefly in a couple of the previous videos that we've done, but we're saying, there's a lot of talk going around at the moment where they're saying, well, whilst businesses are trying to rethink what it is that they're doing right now, what it might look like after after the lockdown and how they move forward, and also how they avoid these situations in the future, how they navigate like such disruption. Now is a really good time to start embracing something like a sprint process and getting your staff involved in that, isn't it? Just to start thinking about, the first challenge might be in this current situation where we can't trade, we can't get footfall through the door. How do we leverage what it is that we've got to still make money, for example? That might be the overarching challenge. And you could be doing that now over a video call, really, you running the same process.
Definitely. And some of my sort of, sprint friends in the community, we're already doing some remote stuff, and mainly when teams were in different locations and stuff like that. And I'll be really honest, I was like, well, I just love the in-person stuff. So whilst I kind of, cast an eye over it and kind of, oh yeah, see how that's useful, now it's more important than ever. And there's lots of techniques, there's lots of, these platforms that we're using now, you can do it. What I would always say to people is you can't do full day sessions. Even a half day can feel quite intense like this. Yeah. So we have to adapt to that, and have lots of, times for breaks. We need time to work on stuff, and you might even want to use breakout rooms and things like that. In some of the platforms offer that, so it can be done, definitely. And my recommendation is just break them down a little bit more so that they have sessions over a number of days, and perhaps for a couple of hours each time, so they're not like full day sessions. That's the only thing I've kind of adapted. But there's lots of software packages, things like Mural and things like that you can actually sort of use to do things like the post-it notes, type exercises and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's about adapting to that, really, and you can still do it. And I think it's a great time at the moment for people to work on stuff like sprints, because we are in a very disruptive environment at the moment, and we do need to move fast. Some companies, I'm reading daily that, yes, there's some government help out there, but they're hanging in the balance. If they don't start doing something quickly, they don't know whether they'll be coming back. So, it is time to do those things. And, get your team working together. It's a great way to get the team together as well. You know, we're all working remotely on our own. It's a good way of getting people to work as a team again.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that whole thing about this. There's no better time to be doing it than now, because obviously what we're experiencing now surely teaches us that you have to react to things, and these kind of tools are really important to be able to do that. I mean, we're seeing too, a lot of businesses just going into hibernation, and their guys are sat at home, often on full salary, but they're probably not being, they're not getting the best out of them. I know some of my guys and some of my friends who are in corporate are basically spending whole days on basically calls like this, but it's absolutely exhausting. Like you said, it's really good to break it down. I mean, there are actually some. I like you, Lindsay. I think it's good to meet people physically, because it's easier as a facilitator to establish a rapport if you're there in the room, especially if you've not met the people before. But there are some big advantages of doing it remotely, and you don't have to travel, you don't have to pay for a venue. You can probably arrange a session. The biggest thing is getting people into one location at a time, and that's the biggest lead time in organising any session. Whereas this can be done at a drop of a hat in reality. So there are some important advantages. I just think I'm sure the technology will get better, the tools will get more and more creative, and it'll, even when this pandemic goes, and we're all fit and healthy and can meet each other, people will have adapted to this way of working and be seeing the advantages to it. And one of my friends is a CFO, and he's horrified by the amount of money they're saving now because they're not traveling. So once you've seen that saving, it's going to be hard to go back to spending it again as well. So there's lots of things to juggle here.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's something all about, we're hearing these buzz terms, aren't we? The new normal and things like that. But we kind of are drifting into that world a little bit. And as you say, Rob, companies are discovering things. One, they don't have to be traveling as much and things like that. They probably don't need to be spending as much money on whatever, and actually can be looking at exploring new solutions or new ways to move their business forward outside of what they've done for so many years. And now, of course, they're forced into it. Edenic has been speaking to clients forever, kind of saying, listen, there's a risk of disruption. In this case, it's a pandemic, but actually, disruption from another business, the way digital technology is evolving. And if you're not on with that, then you're probably going to be at the bottom of the pile because somebody's going to overtake that. So we talk about this all the time. And I suppose it can sound kind of fluffy and whatever, but then when something comes along where it really hits you like this, and you go, well, if you've only got one revenue stream coming in right now from your core business, and that's what you've done, and now you can't operate that revenue stream for whatever parameters are in place, then what do you do? So this time, I guess, if anything, highlights the point that these things are going to happen. And in this case, it's something quite extreme, but the disruption could be any number of things from any number of situations, and being able to navigate that and have fingers in lots of pies and things like that. This is so important, and you've got to bring your team along for the ride, haven't you? And Lindsay, you touched upon it a little bit there, where you say it's a good way to get people together. I quite like the idea of doing these remote sprints, because you can, like a leadership team, can go to your staff and you can say, listen, we're all part of the same company and we're all in trouble. We all want to kind of get out of it, so we all have security in the future. So let's all be part of the solution. Let's work together. I will facilitate you to do that, so that we can spend our time, putting out our ideas in the pot. And there's something quite nice about that, isn't there?
Definitely. I think that's what I love most about it is the way it brings people together. And I've seen people, they physically change from kind of really not wanting to be part of a sprint or not thinking the idea is that great, to absolutely, celebrating it at the end and saying, do you know what, that was a really great experience, because they felt they were heard and they felt they were part of it. They felt like they had some ownership. Whereas being just told, right, this is the new thing we're doing, get on with it. You can't have the same passion and enthusiasm for it, can you, than being part of a decision that was made, and you can see all the reasons why they made that decision, really. But interesting times. And I think as well, I'm getting to hear lots of stories and meeting lots of people that are saying, we had an idea for something that was always in the background of something we were going to do, and we didn't do it. And actually now we know we really need to get on with it, because, if we'd have had that idea and we'd been more, sort of working better online or having that digital product, we wouldn't be where we are now. And I think it's just forcing people to basically get on with it. So
yeah.
Times.
It leads nicely just to one of my next points here, which is about the culture of the business. And certainly at Edenic, it's something that we we put at number one of everything, really, in terms of how companies are innovating and how they're moving forward. And you can have all the strategies and the processes and the tools in the world, but if your culture doesn't facilitate that to happen, then to be frank, none of the other stuff is going to be relevant, really. And this is a really good time to inject a positive collective kind of feeling, isn't it, in the business? And again, going back to business owners or leadership teams, this is your time to really inject culture into the business and sort of say, back to that point, we're all in it together. I want your views. I want you to be part of the journey. You're on the ground. You know what's going on. How can we navigate this? What can we do together? And that is going to be completely, that alone, if you can get the culture right, is going to be so transformative, isn't it, for the businesses moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important, though, when people say that, they really mean it. And I think that's about, the culture means that, yes, someone at the, on the leadership team stands up and says that, but then they actually carry it through. Because I think loads of people like to use the word innovative, but actually don't really know what it means to them. So it's important to, that staff feel safe to make mistakes, that they can, come up with an idea and it's not just going to be thrown away, that they can, come to the MD with a business case or something or an idea and get given the time and the resource to actually go out and try it, run a sprint on it, try it out, go and build a prototype, go and test it with users, whatever that might be. I think it's all very well to say it, but they've got to, they've got to take action. They've got to mean it.
I think that's a really interesting point, because sometimes ideas are not progressed, but they're taken to meeting after meeting after meeting, and they're told to come back with a little bit more information, and in the end they said no, it's a bad idea. But in reality, if you just tested it in the first place, you could have saved all of that time and probably loads of money, because it takes a lot of resource to constantly renew PowerPoints and come back to more meetings and take people's time. So it's a very different way of thinking to most businesses, but just push these ideas. If they're crap ideas, move on. If they're not, execute them.
Yeah, I think sprints are a really good way of like a good starting point of developing that culture as well. Anyone that's looking at any form of marketing will always have stakeholder engagement as like a key part of that. And the reason is, when people are involved in something from the start, they're more likely to be champions of it later on when it rolls out. They're going to want to promote it. It also creates more momentum as well, because then people are pushing it and they want it to go further forward because they feel like it's, they have some ownership of that. So I think getting that right at the start and getting people involved with that idea, with that process, it kind of gets them invested in that culture from the start point, where they want to back this idea and they want to back what's happening. And then really it's a case of management and leadership teams then need to support that and embrace, the ideas that are coming forward and the motivation that these guys want to have to push that idea forward. But I think, based on the topic we're talking about today, the first port of call for me for anything like that, if you wanted to sort of change a culture or get people bought into a new movement, would be to run some form of sprint and have everyone together and have them all involved in that process from day one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, you alluded to it there as well in terms of, if you was thinking about cost or time management or resources and stuff like that, it just makes good sense. I mean, for me, like, if you could have a team run a sprint session, even if they did it over 4 days or if they did that over 4 hours or whatever, but it's just some way of coming up with new concepts and whittling them down and coming up with like a range of options or a basic kind of business plan, if you like, of what it might do. That's what, if I was the guy that was like, they were coming to for the permission to move that forward, that's what I'd want to know. I'd say, okay, what have you got? Let's break it down. Okay, so we're sprinting through it. We've been through a selection of ideas. This is kind of what we got down to. This is where we think it's most feasible. We've done a bit of prototype, and it'll kind of look like this. And that would be information for me to say, okay, this looks interesting. I think this has got legs. Let's have a look at it. As opposed to, this kind of, I've got this idea. Okay, put that idea into a PowerPoint presentation and tell me about it. And then come back, 3 weeks later with a more elaborate PowerPoint presentation of where you're taking that to, and then come back in 3 weeks later, and then it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And then
it loses momentum, and also I suppose what you end up with is a version that basically is not what you had to start with.
Yeah, it's Chinese whispers.
An exciting idea that just doesn't resemble that idea at all, and your competitors just come along and done it and launched it, you know, and you're like, oh, okay, so we just lost out there.
Yeah. There's another aspect of time as well that's really important that people don't tend to think about. If you've got a project that's worth 12 million pounds a year, every month it takes you to get to the market, you're losing £1 million effectively. And people never really think about that, but there is an absolute imperative not to just to get to market, just to get ahead of competition. It's also to start making that cash that you should be making. And I've often, I've worked on projects that are worth way more than £12 million. Unfortunately, it's come with a lot of pressure, but you're potentially losing £10 million a month for every month of delay on a project, and people just do not think about that. They'll just say, well, let's just do another bit of a loop of a thing, and you're wasting all that time. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, but it comes down to that fundamental of being disruptive, doesn't it? I mean, we're always saying that the disruptors out there are the companies that, primarily they come from some form of startup, or at least they've got nothing to lose. They have no real infrastructure, or like they don't have to pay loads of staff. They haven't got a pension fund and all that kind of stuff that comes with like corporate land. So they just roll stuff out. They just go, well, look, let's try it. I think this could work, and they bang, 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 bang. Let's try it. No, it didn't work. Let's go back. Okay, let's try it. And they kind of go around this cycle. So they very quickly get to this point where they go, okay, I think we've got something here. And then boom, they flow it out there. Whereas you take, not just major corporate land, but I think any legacy business, it's just so long and drawn out just to get on with it. Like, what are you waiting for? That's what I find so frustrating. You're saying we're losing money. The business isn't doing very well. People aren't buying this product anymore. We can't get people through the door for whatever the cause that is, but not actively doing anything quick to kind of just try stuff out. It's kind of just sitting and waiting for that magic idea that's going to come along in a year's time, and then you've missed it. You've missed the boat, and unfortunately, at that point, you're a disrupted business, and it's happening all the time. We're saying not all the time.
Yeah, I think there's another benefit to this as well, which is more for leadership teams and management teams. Is that this is also a really great way of getting that snapshot of where you're at with different projects, without having to do these never-ending PowerPoint presentations. So a lot of the projects that I tend to run, they're all quite varied in what they are, but pretty much all of them can be run in a sprint kind of format. And that means I can have, a project management tool, and on there I have the 5 stages of the sprint that I work through, and I can just quickly look through and say, okay, that client's at, point 1, that client's at point 3, that client's at point 2, but we've done 3 cycles of it or whatever. And for a company that's got a lot of different projects going on, and there's, this endless reporting and back and forth and PowerPoints, which every time we mention like these long PowerPoints, Rob's got that look of like someone that's come back from war.
just goes pale.
But it's just a quick way of doing that. It reduces time on the team having to constantly come back and forth and report to you. It means that you've got that quick snapshot, you know where you're at, and you can get things to that finish line a lot quicker.
Yeah. Listen, just one sort of final point just to inject into that, and then just before we come to the end, Lindsay, it'd be nice just to give like a quick fire top tip really for people, what people could be doing right now, actually, what tangible thing they could be doing right now at home. How could they initiate at least a basic starting point of this to get a taste of what that might be like? But just before we come to that, one other thing I wanted to inject in there was the importance of including external parties into your company, or particularly into like a sprint session. And that might be a facilitator like yourself or us. It might be somebody that is completely external to the company, that is in a different role somewhere else, that can come in with completely clear view and not hindered by the company barriers that are in place. It might be an artist, it depends what you're developing, but basically some form of external influence that can just inject a different point of view. That's quite it's a nice way to give fresh thinking, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. So there is a part in the early stages of the sprint where we get experts in. So they might be a customer, it might be someone that's completely not related to the company, or somebody from their sector that they perhaps so they look up to and get a bit of or they consider maybe a guru or something like that. And we do try and bring that into the mix as well, because it, as you say, it brings a fresh perspective. And I think as well the importance of having an external facilitator like ourselves is we bring no baggage. So we don't have any, there's no politics going on. We don't have any, Bob's always the guy that gets to decide everything, so we've got to look to Bob. We don't have that. We just come in as a facilitator and a fresh pair of eyes. And when people say, yeah, well, we did that before, it didn't work, they've got the baggage, whereas a fresh pair of eyes, fresh perspective on things makes a big difference. But yeah, definitely having a real mix and being quite creative about that as well, of thinking, well, who could we bring into the sprint or into the whole innovation process that's not even related to our business or even our sector? Who could we come and say, just come and have a look at this, come and talk to us about it? Because you lose that whole, like, using your own company jargon, using, industry specific things, terms and, terminology. I think it makes you kind of consider things in a very simple way, to somebody completely different and unrelated to your industry.
Yeah.
I think it can kind of shortcut some of the processes as well. Like we've done a lot of projects where we have creatives come in and, as people are coming up with ideas, they'll, sketch it out, or they'll quickly put something together so that the team talk about it can see it. And sometimes you can do that, put something together, and then they'll say, I actually know that's not the right idea, and then move on. So rather than going through, lots of iterations of that idea, they can see it straight away, get a feel for it, and say, that's not quite right. Or, even if they just need to tweak something, it kind of gets that process going a bit quicker, and, people can quickly see what it is that they're working on.
Yeah. No, I think it works really well. I mean, you're absolutely right. To be able to visually see something it just spurs things on, doesn't it? Because you can get a feel for it. We're doing another session on a roundtable next week or so with one of our other consultants who's an engineer, but he thinks with his hands. So he draws while he speaks. And it's kind of weird, but it makes so much more sense, because he's kind of like, yeah, well, it kind of, and then it would kind of, it goes like that, and you can see kind of what he's kind of visualizing, and it's amazing the difference that makes, that visual stimulus, so having an artist in there, or just any form of creative really that can just kind of piece things together, and also piece it together with from their own point of view as well. So as you say, Lindsay, without the barriers of what you might be thinking, they can do it completely freely. So yeah, having external people involved, definitely really important. But overall, I think people at home and people watching this, there's, using the sprint process, it's tried and tested, it works. We're all in difficult situations now, and we certainly all need to be thinking differently about what it is that we're doing. And if we're going to get out of this with a tangible business intact and everyone still have a job, but also be able to move forward and continue to grow in different markets, to continue to be able to avoid other disruptive activity, and believe me, it's there, then embracing something like a sprint process to continuously get a culture of innovation in your business, it's really vital. It's something that we would highly recommend that you get involved in. While you're at home though, now would be a good time to test it out. It just on a basic, you could really just do a trial. So I mean, Lindsay, do you have some top tips for people at home watching this, if they wanted to do this tomorrow with 5 of their staff? Where do they need to start?
I suppose they could do some simple exercises that we use in the sprint, and we apply to quite a lot of other versions of it. So like the brand sprint is things called note and vote. So you could a timed exercise, you could say, right, we're going to spend the next 5 minutes, team. This is going to be the challenge or the idea. I want you to write your best ideas, just whatever they are, on a post-it note, just write them down. Pick your top 2, and then we'll sort of have a look at that and a bit of a note and vote, and then get the rest of the team to vote on some of the best ideas, with no real huge discussion around them, just your best ideas, and just get people really thinking a bit more creatively. But that's a really quick and easy way of doing it. It's timed. It's called note and vote. You literally just sort of note down your ideas, and then you vote on them, and then the decider, which is probably the host maybe of the call or the meeting, would then decide which one to take forward. And then you could actually say, right, this is the one we're taking forward, guys. Between today and tomorrow, when we next have our staff meeting, I want you to come up with some further ideas of how we're going to sort of develop that, and just do it really fast, and not overthink it. I think that's the key kind of spirit to the sprint, is no time to overthink things. Just throw some ideas down, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a key point, really. The whole concept of these things, sprint by definition, is rapid, quick fire moments of action. Essentially, that's ultimately what it is, and whether that's running down a track at 100 meters or if it's coming up with some concepts for a new product, it's the same principle. It's doing it nice and quickly, and without hesitation and without any fuss, and so people at home, if you want to try this, really, the sprint process. In how it works is really a basic system, just for ideating, collaborating, and come up with ideas. People like Lindsey and ourselves can come in and talk to you and work with you. We can do a lot of advise you remotely. So if you want to find out a little bit more about what the sprint process is about, you can drop us a note in the comments and ask away, and one of us can get in contact and talk away and tell you about some of the practical ways that you can be doing this. But ultimately, it's finding a bit of stimulus around. So basically, you're identifying a problem. Maybe you want a shop and you can't get people to come into the shop. That's a problem because everyone's on lockdown. Okay, so how do you leverage that? How else do you make income? So maybe that's what you're trying to tackle. So you're taking some stimulus, some information around that. So what you have in your shop, who your customers are, what technologically is out there, could you be utilizing? What other demands do your skill set meet? You just start taking lots and lots of different stimulus, then using that to come up with ideas, basically. So you're coming up with as Lindsey just touched upon there, quick fire idea. Maybe it's a timed process, a note and vote process, something like that. Maybe you can do it over the space of 1 minute sprints, and at the end everybody pitches back. That's a way to do it. And then you get into some form of basic selection. So all the ideas you pull together, you start whittling them down. Again, you can do that through a selection process. Rob, you've mentioned before about there's loads of different routes you can do this, but you could do like a voting system, or you could do a points based system, or there's any number of ways to come up with selection processes, right? It's gone. Is he with me?
Yeah, no. Often, like, come up with a 3-point selection criteria, so cost, time to market, risk, something like that, and score them between 1 and 10. You can get the best ideas out that way in some sort of objective voting session.
Yeah, and then off the back of that, a little bit of basic prototyping. That could be a sketch or a table layout, or something on a piece of paper. Really, it doesn't need to be anything too graphic. And then the point after that is the test, which is to try it out with people. Remotely, you could send that out to 3 of the stakeholders of the company. You could send it out to a couple of customers. Maybe you can send it out to another person in the industry and say, "We've got this idea. What do you think? It kind of looks like this." And you can do that in a rapid, quick fire way. So for those at home, really, you should give this a try. And for now, if you're a bit worried about getting too into it, just make something up. Pick a product in your shop and say, "How can we innovate around this product? Let's do a quick remote sprint session." And you'd be very, very surprised what comes off the back of it. So highly recommend that you get involved in that. Lindsey, thanks so much for being on the call. This is really interesting. I think if anybody wants to get involved in this, they should really just get on with it, really, and push forward. I think that's the message, isn't it? And sprint. And sprint into this. Where can we find out more about what you're doing? So Mustard Design Sprints and Passion Marketing, are they presumably quite separate entities?
Yeah, they're separate, but they do have synergies between them. So often we're using sprints through the marketing consultancy as well. So they sort of work together, a bit dovetailing going on there. But yeah, I think probably the best platform is LinkedIn. Get in touch with me on there, and I'm sharing things on there, top tips and case studies and ideas and things like that. So yeah, I'm the LinkedIn. So Lindsey Newman-Wood, not many of us.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, guys at home, leave your thoughts in the comments as always. If you want to ask a question, ask us away. We'll get back to you. And I hope this has been insightful, and we look forward to seeing you at the next video. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being involved. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.